Welcome in, everybody. It's the 2025 Raiders free agency preview. It's the O-line and the D-line today, along with Eric Allen. I'm JT. We got a big show lined up for you as we take a look at free agency, EA, as it's really important with the money that the Raiders have and how they build on the strength of a couple of these position groups.
Yeah, and both these position groups so important in football. And one, for us, the Raiders, defensively, is probably the focal point and the strength of our football team is the defensive line when healthy. And then the weakest maybe is the offensive line.
Yeah.
And in those two areas, we have to get it right. We have to get it right. It's been kind of a open door for this offensive line, and defensively, I mean, we have one of the best players in all of football, and there's just so many people who are begging to be on the other side of that because they know they're going to get their opportunities to get after the passer.
Well, as we look at the Raiders' defensive line here currently on the roster, free agents jump out at me. There's just a lot of them. And most of them will not be back because there's just too many.
Right.
And there's other players in the league that you might want to take a look at. The one you and I have been talking about the most, the two players, are Kuntz and Chason. Yeah. Kuntz was out for the year. Wow, that hurt.
Oh, it hurt.
He was going to have a big year opposite of Maxx Crosby. And then Chason came in, and he had a very good year. I thought he showed a lot of energy down the stretch because he was playing for a free agent contract.
That's right.
So those are two guys who kind of play the same position. I would assume the Raiders are only going to go with one of them.
Yeah, let's take Kuntz first. I mean, just unfortunate he wasn't able to play any football for us last year. But as you saw him progress last year, doing a really good job of finding out what he was special at. And he does a really good job of at that point of impact is he has a great bend. So he can kind of bend that waist, bend those knees, and kind of dip under those big tackles and then explode to the quarterback. So they were able to find out that was something that, man, on your initial pass rushing move, it was almost unstoppable at times. He finished the year, I think, with 8 or 9 sacks and just really improved each and every week. So off that, for this year, he was supposed to have his combination move. Unfortunately, wasn't able to play. So now you have one guy who has great move, little undersized, but just great speed and great dip. Now we get to K'Lavon Chaisson. Man, when you look at him, he looks like a defensive end. I mean, he can get into that 9 technique, which means he is so far outside of that tackle or that tight end that that's going to really force that offensive player to have to really kick step a couple times to get to him. He does a great job of having power and speed all combined. He can bull rush you to the seat of the quarterback, or he has a great hand swipe speed rush that he can kind of utilize. Really smart guy, does an incredible job of using his hands, physical, and he has all the physical traits to be a dominant number 2 pass rusher.
Yeah, look at Adam Butler and what he was able to do last year. He deserves a new contract.
Yes.
Don't know if it's going to be in Las Vegas or somewhere else. So what's so complex, everyone, is we're trying to figure out who do you keep. Doesn't mean the players that aren't going to be retained aren't good football players. There's just so much money to go around, and the Raiders are shopping at important positions. With the defensive line, Kuntz, Chason, Butler, guys I'd like to see come back, but then we look at those under contract. Maxx Crosby. Christian Wilkins, to me, is one of the most important players not on the team in the league. I need to know where he's going to be next year. He was rewarded with a huge contract to play here and be a perennial All-Pro.
Yep.
Well, he's coming off an injury. We need him to be dominant, so then possibly you don't have to spend more money on the interior because you have one of the best players in the league up front.
Without a doubt. Just talked to Christian the other day, and he's ready to go. And he understands how important it is for his position to be a position of strength, to be there and be able to take advantage of those opportunities that he's going to be given because of the great pressure that Maxx is going to provide and whoever's on that other side. So he's going to see a lot of single teams. So he's got to be strong at the point of contact as far as the run concept and really earn your way. And we talked about this a lot last year. You got to earn your way to rush the passer. That's by stopping offenses on 1st and 2nd down, putting them in situations on 3rd down that they have to pass, and that's when you see Christian just kind of get after it. He has a joy about him. When we broke down his film in Miami, you just saw someone who just really loved playing football. We thought that was going to be something that was exciting to see on the other side of Maxx. So it's going to be interesting to see how he responds back from this injury, because when you have a great player and they're injured, it is really a mental fight first to be able to get over that injury and have the confidence in what you've been able to do to overcome that thing. And Adam Butler, I just got to say, he started off last year and everyone thought, oh, man, he's a great defensive tackle who can rush the passer. People really question if he can stop the run. I broke down some film on him, and he did a great job of stopping the run. He was one of those guys who showed up each and every game. And he's also a guy in the locker room, in the meeting rooms, who are showing young guys how to get it done, studying film and preparing for football teams. So he's a good guy in the locker room, but you are right. That room is deep. We already have a lot of guys. So this coaching staff is going to be really under fire.
Yeah, you got Tyree Wilson too.
Yeah,
seventh player overall. He's got to he's got to prove to this new regime that he is the answer, not one of the answers. Let's go to the Raiders' offensive line. Also complicated because the players that are under contract here, you wonder what their roles are going to be. Let's start with Andre James, who a professional, and we're friends with him. He took it like a champ when he had to move positions here because of Jackson Powers-Johnson, who is a center. Dylan Parham was the first selection in the third round for a Raider a couple of years ago because of the Devontae 1- and 2-round picks. DJ Glaze played well last year.
Yes, he did.
He did play well last year. He's under contract, which is good to know. Thea Mumford looked like he was going to be the right tackle until he got beat out due to injury. And then good old Colt Miller. Yeah. Where is he at this stage in his career? Because it's the toughest position, I believe, to become a Pro Bowler because there's so much competition. But he's played a lot of his career like a Pro Bowler.
He really has. And the emphasis on that position is magnified by, your quarterback. And if your quarterback is upright, he's going to be able to make some plays. If he's running for his life or he's struggling, then the questions are going to come on that left tackle, usually protecting the blind side of the quarterback. And I give a lot of credit to Colton because he had to battle through some injuries and things like that. And then, the people were playing. I mean, he's coming into each Sunday and game day facing, all Madden type guys, Pro Bowlers and that such. So he's going to have to be the anchor. He's going to be a little more vocal and just kind of letting people know, like, hey, this offensive line, the attitude has to change. Has to be a little bit more like Lincoln Kennedy-esque, if you have my opinion. But those guys, starting for Jackson Powers-Johnson, I think that's a great young player to kind of build around. And I think we're in good situation here at the center position.
The Raiders couldn't run the ball last year, period. And this is the offensive line. You could say it's the running back fault or they didn't open up enough holes. There were injuries. But it's got to be better. Chip Kelly is here now, and Pete Carroll wants to run the football. If there's going to be big changes here in this group, so say they trade out 2 of the players or they don't bring 2 of them back, I think it's going to come down to how physical are the replacements going to be in the run game.
Yes.
Can they get pushed the pile, which we didn't see last year? Pass protection is one thing, but the ability to be road graders and push the pile the other way, I think the Raiders got to get bigger and stronger. They just need better players with a proven track record up front.
Physicality. Yep. That's what it has to be about from here on out. And I think we've seen a little bit of that shift back to that running football team. Not the 80s where you're running the ball 30 times a game, but you have to have a running game that is respected enough that now you can get into some situations where our receivers and our tight ends are on one-on-one situations because the running game is so dominant. And we have to get back to that. It has to be a complementary football for this football team. That's what Pete Carroll's been about. That's what we've seen on his championship caliber football teams. We just saw that from Chip Kelly and Ohio State. At Oregon, yes, they were spreading the ball out, but they were doing a lot of running also with LaMichael James and some of those players back at Oregon. So wherever these 2 gentlemen coaches have been, they've been able to run the ball effectively, and they've won big-time games.
Coming up next on our 2025 free agency preview show, Lincoln Kennedy will join us from our broadcast team, one of the great tackles to play for this organization. We'll get his views next, coming up on YouTube.
One of the best pass rushers in the league, no doubt about it. He proves it every week.
He's one of those guys who can wreck a game at any point in the game.
He is going to be a problem the whole time he plays in this league.
I love what I do. I'm obsessed with what I do. I'm obsessed with being the best at what I do.
A one-man wrecking crew on national television.
He's just a disruptive force.
All that matters is today. Stay present, man. 3.5 hours, do this together, man. It starts with us, it ends with us.
I don't think I've ever seen somebody play football at the level of Maxx Crosby does.
Gang on me, gang on 3, 1, 2, 3, gang!
Crosby in his face, and he drives him to the turf at the 17. He takes him off the middle, and he's wrapped up from behind. Guess who? Maxx Crosby.
You're seeing him taking the game from being great to legendary.
And he's set for the safety. Crosby and Nickel, they squished him to the turf.
He's the best defensive player in football right now. I mean, it's not even close, really.
He's just born to be a Raider.
I'm so far from where I want to be with this a Hall of Famer. I want to be a great player.
And today is one of the good days. Sitting here in front of the program, Maxx Crosby with a new deal to stay in Las Vegas. All right, brother. Before we go into the nitty gritty of all this, give me the sitting here, just got down from the room feeling what are we feeling in this moment?
It's surreal, man. Honestly, I think everybody knows how I feel about the silver and black and my commitment to being the best in the world at what I do and being the best leader and winning. That's truly all that matters. And taking a lot of time to self-reflect, how I can improve on and off the field and be the best version of myself. And I want to be here. You know what I mean? I want to win here. I look at guys like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, some of the greatest ever do it in one place, and Tom Brady's another one that did it at the same place for most of their career. You know what I mean? So those guys, seeing what they did with their career was a big inspiration for me. And for, there's always going to be tough times. And there's been a lot of adversity since I've been here. But I feel like God put me in this position to help be a big part of that change. And Pete Carroll, John Spytek, new ownership, Mark Davis, obviously. The conversations I've had have been incredible. And I'm comfortable. I'm happy. That's all that matters. So I'm excited.
So, okay, let's just go back a little bit before we look forward. And the end of last year, really last year in general, such a weird year in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
But the first time that you've ever missed games, the first times you ever have really been on the sidelines and kind of in that spectator position since you got to the team back in Oakland, when you finished the year up last year, where were you at kind of mentally, and how hard was it for you to kind of be not here doing your thing on a Sunday with the guys?
It was weird. I hated it. It's just different. I've never experienced that in my life, in my career, and it's two fluky injuries that you get rolled up on and you can't avoid. So, unfortunately, that happened. But I feel like everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? It gave me an opportunity to really see things from a different lens and take some time to be with my daughter and be with my family. And it was probably the best thing that could have happened for me. You know what I mean? Mentally, I'm in an incredible place. I'm happy. Inspired, rejuvenated, re-energized. I'm ready to be at my absolute best. I'll just put it that way. So I'm fired up.
To catch our full interview with Maxx, head on over to Raiders.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Raiders 2025 free agency preview is brought to you by Allegiant, the official airline of the Raiders. Low fares, nonstop flights, only at Allegiant.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the 2025 Raiders free agent preview show. And Lincoln Kennedy joins us, as you knew he would. And Link, I'm just going to jump right in right now. Soon to be, the gold jacket isn't here yet, soon to be Hall of Famer Eric Allen. Your comments.
First of all, congratulations, EA. This is the first time we had a chance to talk to each other since the news came out.
Yep.
And I'm so happy for you and your family. Well deserved. It's so proud to call you a friend, to call you a teammate, a brother, a fellow San Diegan. I am so happy for you and your family. Congratulations. Well deserved. I'm so proud for you, EA.
Thank you, Link. We're great friends and great teammates. You have the opportunity to be on a football team with one of your hometown guys, and that 4-year run for me was really magical. I mean, it really topped off and capped off my career. But once they say, once a Raider, always a Raider, you do feel that. from that time I walked into the building in 1998 to now. I just love the fact that this is my family now.
Well, as Lincoln said,
you remember that day, EA, when we hung out? When we hung out in 1998? You remember that day?
Exactly.
Had lunch in the cafeteria at the old Alameda facility. Talked about EA coming over and gave him the pluses and the minuses.
A great job.
For the team.
You sold it. You sold it, my man.
Unbelievable. So, Link, let's jump in. We're going to start off with your specialty, the O-line. And
yes,
I'm going to get right at it. There are some guys who are probably going to be back and some guys who are probably not going to be back. You got Colt Miller and Jackson Powers-Johnson in the middle. We saw DJ Glaze come in. Before we get to this list of potential additions on the free agency list on the offensive line, how'd you grade this O-line at the end of the year when you looked at the good, bad, and the injuries?
The O-line, for the most part, guys, struggled throughout the season, mainly with the simplest things. Now, what I kind of accredit this to is the difference of coaching philosophies. When you exit a coach out early in the season, you have to adjust. I'm not sure how well-versed this offensive line was with their former coach before they went to the changes that we've seen. But the thing is that they've got to play better. It really is embarrassing when you have a first down on goal and you can't run the ball in. You can't score from that 3 yards out. That's embarrassing, and that can't happen. So I'm of the mindset and thinking that you really need to not totally start over with 5 new guys, but I really think you need to part with at least 2, if not 3 guys, and go somewhere different. This offensive line has got to get better. If the Raiders are going to be successful in any capacity, and not alone challenging in this division, they have got to get this offensive line better.
I tell you, Link, yes, you are right. We have to get better, but it's all about consistency. I mean, each of these guys, under contract or free agents, all have been able to play a little bit because of health and injury concerns. How can you build a foundation if you don't have the same players playing each week, right? And that goes back to 2 or 3 years ago when there was kind of this rotation in the offensive line. For the Raiders to be a quality football team, how do you get to a point where you are healthy and you're playing with good, young tenacity?
Well, I will say this, EA. To be healthy during the season in the National Football League is something everybody wants. It doesn't happen. But just like any other professional athlete, what's their greatest attribute? Availability.
Right.
You got to be available. You got to be able to play. And you got to know what you're doing when you're out on the football field. So with that being said, much to your point, EA, with having not having that consistency with the players, it's really hard to grade who deserves what or who deserves to be on the football field. I first go to availability, and then I would look at assignment and technique when you're evaluating these guys and playing together. To me, the true secret of a good offensive line is not only being out there on a football field, but playing together time and time again. You can't keep rotating the lineups or the matchups to think that you're going to come out better. It just doesn't work like that. You've got to have 5 guys that you can rely on that will go out there week in and week out and fight for you. And I don't think the Raiders have found that yet, mainly because all the things that we talked about, the inconsistencies in play, the inconsistencies with injuries and being available, all of that is something to think of forward. And guys, JT and EA going forward, it's almost going to be like you're starting with a brand new team this season, this fall camp, this summer camp and the OTAs. You're going to basically see an upheaval, and I think it's rightfully so. This offensive line needs to be held more accountable for things they haven't done over the last couple of years versus things they're projected to do.
All right, so here's the elephant in the room, and some of it's good. There's a lot of guys under contract. Okay, we're talking about Jordan Meredith, who's considered by PFF, he won the right job over Dylan Parham at one point, considered one of the best sleeper interior offensive linemen. The Raiders have him cost effective. He's a good player. Andre James lost his position. Jackson Powers-Johnson is a lock. Then you got DJ Glaze, who's not expensive and proved that he could play, but I don't think he's an elite right tackle because he's just young. And then we're looking at Dylan Parham, as we said, who was the first pick in a former draft class because we gave up the 1 and 2 for Devontae Adams. And then Thayer Mumford. So you got a lot of guys here before I even attempt to give you some of the free agents who are available here. So we're talking about releasing or cutting or using these guys who might be starting Lincoln in depth positions if better players come in ahead of them.
I do like the fact that you talked about young guys on their way up. However, and I'm going to call it like I see it, to me, Dylan Parham took a step backwards last year. He did not take a step forward. He took a step backwards. Colton Miller, probably, coming off the surgery, it's hard to predicate what or predict how healthy he was throughout the year, but I don't think he has as formidable year as good a year as he had in times past. It's just and I don't mean to be. I'm not looking for anybody to lose their job. I certainly want these guys to be healthy, but I think these guys need to be held accountable, because if I'm a coach in that locker room, I'm saying, look, you need to pick it up, or I can't rely on you. There's just certain things that I can't rely on. You talked about Andre James sort of falling off. So the fact that you've got young, good offensive linemen coming up allows you to go with the depth, but you still need starters. And I think, and if I'm looking at a free agency with as much money as the Raiders have to spend, there are starters I'm looking for that are available in the free agency market on both sides of the line. Those are guys that I might focus on, because I think those are guys that would give me the upper hand.
Well, we talk about youth, and I think that's really important to kind of build this football team, particularly up front with the youth that we've seen. I love the fact that Jackson Powers was running down the field, cracking guys at the end of the plays, really finishing off plays.
Cut down on the penalties, right,
yes,
EA?
Yeah.
Cut down on the penalties.
They were
the stupid penalties. You got to stop that. The jumping off sides, the holding, clearing the pile. Those are things that hurt the team. You've got. Yes. I don't mind the tenacity. I don't mind the aggression, but don't do things that are going to cost your team yards. And when your offense is struggling, as the Raiders' offense has struggled all season, you can ill afford to have those. Didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to interject that.
Yeah, but that's important, and that's what the young guy has to understand is what penalties can't be accepted, right? So, but you have to play violent. And I think these young guys are trying to create that kind of atmosphere. Don't you see that with these young guys?
I do, but it's got to be controlled. I've always thought that football is controlled violence. Between the whistles, the snap of the ball starts the play, the whistle ends the play. You got to play controlled within there. Now, believe me, and you know this because you see me play, I've done everything under the sun. I've kicked, I've bit, I've scratched, I pinched, I punched, I knocked people down, I've elbowed, I did everything. But between the whistles, I was one of the least penalized offensive linemen because I knew how to do it. And I know how to talk my way out of a bad situation. So, for that being that case, but you got to play between the whistles, and you got to have controlled escalation and violence and stuff like that. Don't cost your team.
Yep.
Yeah, the best player is Trey Smith out of Kansas City, and it looks like he'll be franchise tagged here. And he's a great player. Cam Robinson didn't have a great grade, 53rd amongst tackles from PFF. I want to throw out Ronnie Stanley's name because Ronnie Stanley went to Bishop Gorman here in Vegas.
Yeah.
He's probably the most decorated player in the history of Bishop Gorman, and that says a lot. They got some great players. And he was on the path for the Hall of Fame about 3 or 4 years ago, and he's had a bunch of injuries. So he's someone who might want to come home for technically a hometown discount. Tevin Jenkins out of Chicago. And Kevin Zeitler out of Detroit is someone that I circled here. But let me ask you both, and I'll start with you, EA. You got a brand-new head coach, a brand-new offensive coordinator who just won a national championship at Ohio State, John Spytek, who did a remarkable job on the staff at Tampa, building that O-line in front of the aging Brady. What's it like, EA, when you got a new regime coming in and they're looking at the depth of the team in place and then they go shopping for free agents?
It depends on who you're playing, who's the top dog in your division, what type of football is being played. I think 2024 season was like a throwback season where they played complementary football all over the nation, right? You have a running game that can kind of help you out in difficult situations. Of course, you need to be able to throw the ball. But that leads me to what we have is an opportunity to build this team to be a complementary team, to be able to run the football. And that first has to happen at the offensive line. I'm not sure if offensive tackle or offensive guard is going to be the most important, but this is the key of this football team this year going forward is the offensive line. We have to find a way to have some consistency and be able to create some energy with that offensive line.
Yeah, and Link, right back to you to follow up. Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll, head coach and OC. We got Greg Olson coming back. What process are they in now, looking at tape and getting to see the guys in the building and wondering who's going to be here or not? Because seems like we've gone over a lot of players who are going to be auditioning for jobs under a new regime starting up here.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I will say this, guys, when it comes to Chip Kelly, you look at his formula for success with Ohio State, what they were able to do in their national championship run. They had a running game. And they had a big bruising offensive line. And that's what's going forward. But much of the names that you mentioned, JT, well, guys, in my opinion, who I would probably stay away from, I'd stay away from Stanley. At 31 years old, this tackle, it was, as you've talked about, probably heading for a gold jacket. The injuries have kind of taken him over. I don't know if you invest big free agency money in someone like that, especially with the age he's at. And I'm not saying that he's terribly old. I think he's, 30 years old or 31, somewhere around there. So he's not terribly old. However, coming off the stem of those injuries, you have no idea how much he's going to be available for you. I like Trey Smith, and I would like to make a move for Trey Smith if you're going to commit big free agency money to that position or that area, offensive line. It's either, for me, Trey Smith, or I like a guy like Will Freeze, the offensive guard out of Indianapolis. I like him particularly. I think he's a young guard. He's 27 years old, very strong at the point. I think he'd be a great addition to this offensive line. It's guys like that I'm looking forward to seeing. And then, you talk about going on the other side of the ball, which I know we'll get to in a little bit, but, there's guys out there. But for the most part, the Raiders are in a good position, in my opinion, for many reasons. First, they've got a good nucleus of young guys already under contract. So they don't need to go out there and buy a whole new team. More importantly, we've seen over the last couple of years, some of these young guys come into their own and play respectively well. That can bode well going forward because you don't need a complete overhaul like the most times you get when you have a coaching change and a general manager change.
Lincoln Kennedy joins us. Let's jump into the defensive line. Another fascinating topic here. You got the greatest player, one of the best players in the league in Maxx. Christian Wilkins is coming back. So before we get into this list, I'll start with you, Lincoln. What to expect from him? He was brought in, we want to talk about money. The amount of money that was spent on him to come in here. He got an injury, fair. I'm assuming he's going to be 100%. He's on the interior. Before we get to Kuntz and Chason, the interior with Adam Butler and what we've seen last year, to me it's all predicated on Wilkins. Do you believe, Lincoln, he can come back and go right to the Pro Bowl and play at an elite level? That's what he was brought in to do initially.
I do. You keep him healthy. I think he can definitely do that. And it'd be a definite aid to Maxx Crosby coming off that end. Look, but I will say this. I think that the Jenkins, the Butlers, and the interior defensive line that we had this past season played impressively well. For what you didn't have a lot of star power when Wilkins went down, but they played extremely well. They did not only did well getting penetration, but they also did a good job at becoming block eaters and helped slowing down some of that run deficiencies that we saw in the early part of the season that plagued this defense. So I was impressed. I think, in all honesty, guys, in my opinion, this defensive line is the strongest group on this team collectively. I think that is strength. You don't necessarily have to go after that. I think, the addition to seeing how Malcolm Kuntz came back or comes back after the injury will be welcome. I understand that Tyree Wilson came to his own a lot of games. So I think they are solid with their rotation. You don't need to commit a lot of resources to, but there are some defensive ends out there. There are some edge rushers. There are some guys that are definitely that you want to take notice of. The Sweats, the Khalil Max, just to go on a little tirade about the edge rushers. They're out there. Defensive tackles are really strong in this class, but I already think we've got a strong foundation set on this team.
You are right. This is the foundation of our football team. And Rob Leonard deserves a tremendous amount of credit. He's an amazing coach. Everyone who has gotten here has gotten better. He's really developed them and being able to get to a point where you have your number one move, and then he requires you to perfect that before you move on to the next one. So all these guys, when we talk about Kuntz, when we talk about Caleb Vaughn, all these guys have been able to come here and really find a home on the other side of Maxx. It's really important that we look in-house first before we go outside, because he's coached these guys. They understand that it's going to take steps to be able to be a dominant player. There's a lot riding on you because Maxx is on the other side. So I think that's the one thing. And then the other, obviously, the middle of the football field is so important. So those two tackles need to play at a very high level to make sure that we can stop the run. That's something that's kind of popped up for us all year long, including preseason. We saw, we couldn't stop the run consistently. So that's going to be the area of concern for me, is not the edges so much. I think the edges, we're going to do fine. We have backup for Maxx. We have some guys on the other side who've had opportunities and made the most of the opportunities. But you guys are right. Up front, in the middle of the football field, we have to have guys who can stop the run and get after the passer. And I think that's critically important.
Yeah, but one of the big things that I'll push back on this to you, Lincoln, is that we're looking to get better players. So if you look at Kuntz and Chason, you got to say to yourself, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, who had a Super Bowl with Philadelphia, you got to start looking at players saying, are they upgrades or are you good with that? Because I agree with both of you. I think the strength of this team is the defensive line. I go back to Pete Carroll and the Legion of Boom. It was built on the back end with Wagner at linebacker when you started looking at some of the players there. So Lincoln, Khalil Mack's a big name. I don't see a fit with Khalil. I love the guy. What a great Raider he was. But he's on the back end of his career. I'm not saying it's impossible to bring him in, but when you look at the players such as Chason and Malcolm Kuntz, you got to answer one question. Is there a better player at that position that John Spytek says, these guys are good, Lincoln, but I found someone better, and I'm going to spend a little bit of money there?
Well, I think that, it's absolutely invaluable to find a pass rush that can generate pressure with only 3 or 4 guys.
Bingo.
Because that's what you want out of your defensive line. And we've seen teams in the past that have had success with rotating that defensive line. And one of the reasons why the Philadelphia Eagles had the amount of success they've had over the last couple of years is they've had a strong rotation with their defensive front. So much to your point, here's the thing that has to happen for this defensive line to be successful. First and foremost, you've got to have great sound guys who know how to win and technique one-on-ones, who know how to defeat those one-on-ones. Because the way the Raiders play defense right now, you put a lot of stress on either your linebackers or your secondary by forcing them to cover man-on-man in space, but also be aware of the run, being able to tackle in space. Now, we've seen how teams have used that against us, where they block the interior part and they put the corners on an island and have to make the tackles in space. Sometimes you struggle, sometimes you don't. You're able to do well. But that's the big thing with this defensive line and defensive front going forward. So you have to have a pressure package in place. Guys have got to be able to defeat one-on-one. Also, here's something that could take in consideration. Maxx Crosby has a green light to go anyway. He can go inside, he can go out. Defining the sort of sound of the defense or the parameters of the defense, your guys around that, as EA would know, have to know that. If this guy has a two-way go or he's a great improviser like Junior Seau was, may he rest in peace, then you've got to take part where he is. Where's number 98 on the field? Conversely, you see how teams are going to adjust to that. The rest of the defense has to realize that and know that, because now it's a great opportunity for somebody to win on a one-on-one to make a play. So that's where the team defense concept comes into play.
The great Lincoln Kennedy on our 2025 free agency preview show. Thank you, Lincoln. We'll see you in the building real soon.
Thanks, homeboy.
Sounds like a plan, my guy.
Always great catching up with Lincoln Kennedy. His passion, his energy for this is second to none. Now let's take a look at a couple of the shows that we have coming up. Cornerbacks and wide receivers Thursday on March 6th, and then we'll wrap it up with the running backs, EA, and the linebackers, really important as free agency opens up.
And free agency is big time, especially with those running backs and linebackers for our Raiders.
Couple of holes here to fill, and the Raiders have a lot of work to do as we continue on. Thanks for joining us on the 2025 Free Agent Preview Show. For Eric Allen, I'm JT. We'll see you back here next time.